Commander Zyra Vex stood at attention in the pristine white chamber of the Galactic Council, her 7-foot frame casting an intimidating shadow across the crystalline floor. Her purple skin gleamed under the harsh lights, and the ceremonial scars along her arms told the story of 1,000 conquered worlds. She was, without question, the most feared warrior in the known galaxy, which made it absolutely hilarious that she was about to receive her orders from a committee that looked like they'd lose a fight with a particularly aggressive houseplant. Commander Vex, wheezed High Counselor Gleep, his gelatinous form wobbling nervously behind his podium. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Zara raised an eyebrow. Short notice? They'd been summoning her with increasingly frantic messages for 3 weeks. But, sure, let's call it short notice. We have a situation, continued Counselor Blorth, his 6 eyes blinking in sequence like a malfunctioning traffic light. A species that defies all logic, all reason, all basic survival instincts. Humans, spat Counselor Quib, and the entire chamber shuddered as if someone had mentioned a particularly nasty space plague. Zara had heard whispers about humans, of course. Every warrior in the galaxy had. They were the species that took one look at a perfectly reasonable peace treaty and decided to use it as kindling for their barbecues. The ones who saw a dangerous predator and thought, you know what? I bet that would taste great with the right seasoning. They're monsters, Gleep continued, his voice dropping to a horrified whisper. They weaponize everything, Commander, everything. We've received reports of them turning cooking utensils into projectiles, using cleaning supplies as chemical weapons, and don't even get me started on what they do with their recreational vehicles. They call it camping, Quip added with a visible shudder. They voluntarily leave their climate-controlled habitats to sleep in the wilderness, surrounded by creatures that want to eat them, and they consider this fun. Zara nodded seriously, though privately she was starting to think these humans sounded kind of interesting. Any species that treated survival as a hobby clearly had some serious confidence issues, or some serious skills, maybe both. Your mission, Blarth announced dramatically, is to infiltrate their society, locate their greatest warrior, and eliminate them before they can spread their chaotic influence to other worlds. Consider it done, Zara replied, snapping a crisp salute. How many backup units should I requisition? The council members exchanged glances, their various appendages twitching nervously. Oh no, Commander, Gleep said. This is far too dangerous for a full assault. We're sending you alone. Stealth mission. In and out before they know what hit them. Zara almost laughed. A stealth mission? Against some primitive species that probably hadn't even figured out faster than light travel? This was going to be the easiest assignment of her career. Understood, High Council. I'll have their champion's head delivered within the week. As she strode toward the exit, her boots clicking against the crystal floor, Zara was already planning her victory celebration. Maybe she'd take a vacation afterward, somewhere with decent weather and terrible local wine. She had no idea she was walking straight into the most confusing, frustrating, and ultimately life-changing week of her existence. And it would all start with a really, really good sandwich. 3 days later, Zara's stealth infiltration pod screamed through Earth's atmosphere like a meteor with anger management issues. She'd programmed it to land in what her scanners identified as a major population center, somewhere she could quickly locate and eliminate the human's greatest warrior. Unfortunately, her navigation system had apparently been designed by the same genius who thought putting the self-destruct button next to the coffee dispenser was a good idea. The pod slammed into the asphalt parking lot of Tony's Cosmic Kitchen with all the subtlety of a supernova at a library opening. Smoke billowed from the crash site as Zara kicked open the pod's door, her battle armor gleaming menacingly in the late afternoon sun. She'd spent hours perfecting her entrance. 7 feet of purple-skinned death machine, armed with plasma cannons and wearing enough protective gear to stop a small asteroid. This was the moment when the humans would scream in terror, when their greatest champion would step forward to face her, when glory and conquest would be hers. Instead, she heard someone yell, "Oh, come on! I just finished the marinara." Zara blinked, her helmet's targeting system trying to process this unexpected response. Through the smoke, she could make out a figure in a white apron jogging toward her, and he didn't look particularly terrified. He looked annoyed. "Lady, are you okay?" the human called out, waving away smoke with a kitchen towel. "That was one heck of a landing. Though I gotta say, your timing's terrible. We're right in the middle of dinner rush." This was Tony Martinez, owner and head chef of Tony's Cosmic Kitchen, and he was having what could generously be called a challenging day. The dinner rush was brutal, his sous chef had called in sick, and now some kind of science fiction convention was apparently happening in his parking lot. "Human," Zara announced, in her most intimidating voice, her helmet's speakers adding an appropriately menacing echo. I am Commander Zara Vex of the Galactic Council. I have come to challenge your greatest warrior. Tony stopped about 10 feet away, looking her up and down with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen every possible variety of weird customer. Okay, cool costume, very authentic looking. But listen, if you're here for the convention group, they already ordered, table 12. Though honestly, you might want to get that smoke looked at. Doesn't seem safe. Zara's targeting system was now flashing error messages. This human was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, possibly both. You dare mock me? She demanded, raising her plasma cannon. I am death incarnate. I have conquered 1,000 worlds. Right, and I make a mean chicken parmesan, Tony replied cheerfully. Look, I don't know if you're method acting or what, but you look like you could use a sandwich. When's the last time you ate something that wasn't, I don't know, space rations? And that's when Zara's carefully planned invasion hit its first major snag, because despite her extensive training in psychological warfare, combat tactics, and advanced weapons systems, nobody had ever taught her how to respond to genuine hospitality from someone she was supposed to kill. What? She stammered, lowering her weapon slightly. Food, Tony said, as if explaining something obvious to a particularly slow child. You know, sustenance, the thing that keeps you alive. You crash land in my parking lot, you're probably hungry. It's basic hospitality. Through the restaurant's windows, Zara could see other humans going about their business, eating, talking, laughing. A few had come outside to check on the commotion, but instead of panicking, they seemed mildly curious at best. Is that the new street performer? One of them asked. Nah, probably just another food blogger, replied another. They're getting really creative with their gimmicks these days. Zara's world, very carefully constructed around concepts like fear, respect, and immediate surrender, began to crack just a little around the edges. I don't understand, she said, and for the first time in centuries, she actually meant it. 20 minutes later, Zara found herself sitting in a corner booth of Tony's cosmic kitchen, her helmet on the table beside a plate that had contained what Tony called the full experience. She'd approached the meal like a tactical exercise, analyzing each component for potential threats, toxicity levels, and strategic value. The result had been a complete system failure of her preconceptions about human civilization. So, Tony said, sliding into the seat across from her with his own plate, what's your story? And please don't say you're actually from space, because I've heard that one from at least 3 customers this week. Zara watched him cut into his food with practiced efficiency. Her helmet's analysis systems were going crazy, cataloging what they insisted on classifying as advanced combat techniques. The way he wielded that knife, the precision of his movements, the controlled application of heat and pressure to transform raw materials into something entirely different. This human was clearly a master tactician. Your weapon handling is impressive, she said carefully. Tony looked down at his fork. Thanks. I guess 20 years in the kitchen teaches you a thing or two about efficiency. 20 years of combat training, Zara nodded approvingly. And this facility serves as your armory? Well, I mean, we've got some pretty serious equipment back there, Tony admitted, gesturing toward the kitchen. Industrial-grade stuff. The salamander alone could probably take your eyebrows off if you're not careful. Salamander. Obviously some kind of plasma weapon. Zara's respect for this human warrior grew. You must have many battles here, she observed. Oh yeah, especially during lunch rush. Today was brutal. Had 3 tables sending food back, the new server dropped an entire tray of pasta, and don't even get me started on the party of 12 that showed up without a reservation. Tony shook his head ruefully. Some days it's like running a war zone. Zara listened with growing amazement. This human spoke of combat with such casual acceptance, such professional detachment. He commanded a facility where multiple conflicts occurred daily, managed subordinate warriors who clearly saw heavy action, and did it all while maintaining what appeared to be extremely high morale among his troops. The other humans in the restaurant, she realized, weren't just customers. They were veterans, soldiers who'd fought alongside this Tony character and now came here to share war stories and plan future campaigns. Tell me about your strategy, she said, leaning forward intently. Well, the secret is really in the prep work, Tony explained, warming to the subject. You can't just throw things together and hope for the best. Everything has to be planned out, timed perfectly. You've got to know your ingredients, understand how they work together, what brings out the best in each component. Brilliant. He was describing advanced tactical coordination using some kind of elaborate code system. And your weapons? Oh man, you should see the kitchen. Tony's eyes lit up. I've got this beautiful set of German steel that my grandfather left me. Balanced perfectly. Holds an edge like you wouldn't believe. And the heat control system? That's where the real magic happens. You've got to know exactly how much pressure to apply, when to back off, when to go full intensity. Zara nodded sagely. Clearly this human had inherited weapons from a previous generation of warriors and had spent decades perfecting their use. The mention of heat suggested some kind of energy weapon system, probably requiring years of training to master safely. Your grandfather was also a warrior? Best chef in 3 counties, Tony said proudly. Taught me everything I know about bringing people together, making them happy, showing them you care through what you create for them. This was it. This was why humans were so dangerous. They didn't just fight for territory or resources. They fought for each other, for abstract concepts like happiness and care. They transformed simple sustenance into emotional warfare, using it to build loyalty, forge alliances, create bonds stronger than any military contract. You weaponize emotion? Zara said with something approaching awe. Tony laughed. I guess you could put it that way. Food's about more than just calories, you know. It's about connection, about showing someone they matter enough for you to put time and effort into making something special just for them. And there it was, the most terrifying revelation of Zara's career. Humans didn't just fight with plasma cannons and explosives. They fought with kindness. They conquered through generosity. They won by making their enemies feel valued and cared for. No wonder the Galactic Council was terrified. As Tony continued talking about flavor profiles and seasonal ingredients, Zara found herself genuinely listening, not for tactical intelligence, but because his passion was infectious, his dedication genuine, his obvious care for his craft and his customers unlike anything she'd encountered in a lifetime of military service. For the first time in her career, Commander Zara Vex was beginning to understand that maybe, just maybe, she'd been fighting on the wrong side all along. Over the next 3 days, Zara found herself returning to Tony's cosmic kitchen with increasingly flimsy excuses for surveillance. She told herself she was conducting deep reconnaissance, studying the enemy's psychological warfare techniques, gathering intelligence on human combat capabilities. She was absolutely not developing feelings for the enemy commander. That would be ridiculous, unprofessional, and completely against every regulation in the Galactic Council's military handbook. The fact that she'd started arriving early just to watch Tony prep vegetables was purely tactical observation. The way he moved through his kitchen with fluid precision, talking softly to his ingredients as if they were old friends, had nothing to do with the strange fluttering sensation in her chest cavity. And she definitely wasn't memorizing the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled at her increasingly bizarre questions about human warfare protocols. So, she said on day 4, trying to sound casually professional, while demolishing her 3rd helping of what Tony called just a simple pasta primavera. Tell me about your defensive strategies when facing multiple hostile forces. Tony looked up from where he was artfully arranging garnish on another customer's plate. You mean like when we get slammed during Friday night dinner rush? Exactly, Zara nodded seriously, ignoring the way her pulse quickened when he looked directly at her. Multiple threats, time pressure, resource management. Well, the key is delegation and communication, Tony explained, moving with that same economical grace that Zara had started cataloging in her dreams. You've got to trust your team, make sure everyone knows their role, and stay calm under pressure. The moment you start panicking, everything falls apart. Leadership philosophy, strategic thinking, emotional regulation under extreme stress. This human was not just a warrior, he was a general, and the way he talked about trust, about his team, with such genuine care and respect. Oh no. Oh no, no, no. Zara set down her fork with the careful precision of someone defusing a bomb. The realization hit her like a plasma blast to the chest. This wasn't tactical admiration. This wasn't professional respect for a worthy opponent. This was infinitely worse. She was falling in love with her target. Tony, completely oblivious to the existential crisis occurring 3 feet away, continued arranging microgreens with the focus of an artist. You okay there? You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm fine, Zara said, her voice pitched slightly higher than usual. Completely fine, just processing intelligence data. But she wasn't fine. She was the opposite of fine. She was a highly trained killer developing romantic feelings for the exact person she'd been sent to eliminate. And the irony was so thick you could cut it with one of Tony's perfectly balanced German steel knives. Hey Tony, called out Maya, one of the servers. Your girlfriend's helmet is beeping. She's not my girlfriend, Tony replied automatically, then paused. Wait, is that normal? The beeping thing? Zara's helmet was indeed beeping, displaying an incoming priority message from the Galactic Council in bright, angry red letters. She quickly grabbed it, shoving it under the table like evidence of a crime. Technical malfunction, she said weakly. Happens all the time in this atmosphere. The truth was, her helmet had been beeping for 2 days straight, and she'd been ignoring it because she knew exactly what those messages contained. Demands for progress reports, questions about why her mission was taking so long, increasingly suspicious inquiries about her extended surveillance period, and she had no idea how to explain that their most feared commander was currently having a complete emotional meltdown because a human male had made her something called tiramisu and explained that it meant pick me up in Italian, and somehow that small act of kindness had demolished her entire worldview. You know, Tony said, sliding into the booth across from her with that easy smile that made her chest do impossible things. I've been thinking about what you said the other day, about being from space. Zara's blood temperature dropped several degrees. What about it? Well, if you really were from another planet, that would be pretty amazing, wouldn't it? I mean, imagine traveling all that way just to end up in a little restaurant in nowhere particular, eating pasta with some random guy who thinks the height of adventure is trying to perfect his marinara recipe. He was looking at her with such gentle humor, such complete acceptance of whatever weirdness she represented that Zara felt something inside her chest crack open like an egg. It would be amazing, she heard herself saying, and terrifying, because what if you came here planning one thing but then you found something completely different, something that changed everything you thought you knew about yourself and what you wanted? Tony's expression grew more serious, more thoughtful. Then I guess you'd have to decide what mattered more, what you thought you wanted, or what you actually found. And there it was. The question that had been haunting her for days, wrapped up in Tony's characteristically straightforward wisdom. Under the table, her helmet beeped again, more insistently this time. Zara could practically feel the Galactic Council's impatience radiating through subspace. They wanted results. They wanted confirmation that their greatest threat had been eliminated. They wanted her to kill the man who just offered her a choice between duty and happiness, between the life she'd always known and the possibility of something entirely different. Tony reached across the table and gently touched her hand, his skin warm against her purple fingers. Whatever's going on with you, whoever you really are, it doesn't matter to me. You're welcome here as long as you want to stay. Zara stared down at their joined hands, human and alien, warrior and chef, duty and desire. She'd spent her entire life following orders, conquering worlds, serving an empire that had never once asked her what she actually wanted. And what she wanted, she realized with crystalline clarity, was sitting right across from her, offering unconditional acceptance and really exceptional Italian food. The helmet beeped again, urgent and demanding. This time Zara turned it off completely. Turning off her communication device, as it turned out, was roughly equivalent to poking a sleeping dragon with a stick made of pure stupidity. Zarag discovered this the hard way, when she arrived at Tony's the next morning to find Lieutenant Commander Crix standing in the parking lot, looking like a 7-foot-tall bureaucratic nightmare in full dress uniform. His pale blue skin was practically glowing with righteous indignation, and his forearms were crossed in a configuration that somehow managed to express maximum disapproval. "Commander Vex," he said in the clipped, precise tone that had made him the most feared middle manager in the Galactic Fleet. "Perhaps you could explain why you've been ignoring 17 priority communications from High Command." Zara's heart sank somewhere in the vicinity of her boots. Crix was her former second-in-command, a by-the-book officer who'd probably never had an unauthorized thought in his entire career. He was also, unfortunately, extremely good at his job. "Lieutenant Commander," she replied, trying to project the same authority she'd once wielded without thinking. "This is unexpected." "The most unexpected," Crix said, consulting a holographic tablet that materialized from his uniform, "is finding our most decorated warrior sitting in a primitive food preparation facility, apparently conducting an extended surveillance operation on a single target for 6 days running." Through the restaurant's windows, Zara could see Tony setting up for the morning prep, completely unaware that his parking lot had become ground zero for an intergalactic incident. He caught sight of her through the glass and waved cheerfully, that same easy smile that had been systematically dismantling her defenses all week. Crix followed her gaze and his expression grew, if possible, even more disapproving. "Commander, please tell me you haven't developed personal feelings for the target." "Don't be ridiculous," Zara said, a little too quickly. "I'm conducting a thorough intelligence assessment of human psychological warfare capabilities." For 6 days. They're very complex. Commander. Crick stepped closer, lowering his voice to the tone he'd once used to explain to junior officers why filing reports in triplicate was actually important for galactic security. The Council is concerned. They've received reports of your pod crash landing in broad daylight, of you sitting in public establishments without proper camouflage, of extended interactions with the local population. All part of the infiltration protocol, Zara insisted, but she could hear how weak it sounded even to her own ears. Crix pulled up another holographic display, this one showing what appeared to be security footage from various angles around the restaurant. This shows you returning to the same location every day, sitting in the same booth, engaging in prolonged conversations with the same individual. Oh, that was bad. When viewed from an objective tactical perspective, her behavior looked less like strategic surveillance and more like, well, exactly what it was. They're factors you don't understand, she said desperately. Then explain them to me. Crick's voice carried the patient tone of someone prepared to listen to absolutely any rational explanation, no matter how creative. Zara opened her mouth, then closed it. How could she possibly explain that she'd discovered humans didn't conquer through force, but through kindness? That their greatest warrior was actually a chef who'd somehow weaponized hospitality? That she'd fallen completely hopelessly in love with his passion for creating things that brought people joy? The human warfare protocols are more sophisticated than our intelligence suggested, she said finally. Crick studied her for a long moment, his pale blue features unreadable. Commander, I've known you for 43 years. I was there when you single-handedly conquered the Proxima Rebellion. I watched you negotiate the surrender of 3 star systems using nothing but tactical brilliance and sheer force of will. He paused, and his voice grew gentler. I've never seen you look at anyone the way you just looked at that human. The words hit Zara like a physical blow, because Crix was right. In 4 decades of military service, she'd never once allowed personal feelings to interfere with her duty. She'd prided herself on her professionalism, her emotional discipline, her absolute commitment to the mission. And now she was standing in a parking lot, arguing with her former subordinate about why she couldn't bring herself to kill a man whose only crime was making her feel like maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than conquest and duty. The Council has made a decision, Crix continued, producing another holographic device. If you cannot complete this mission within the next 24 hours, they're authorizing a full orbital strike on this location. Zarar's blood turned to ice. They can't do that. There are innocent civilians here. The Council believes the human threat has been underestimated. They're prepared to reclassify this as a preemptive military action, rather than a surgical elimination. Through the window, Tony was teaching one of his younger cooks how to properly season a sauce, his hands guiding theirs with infinite patience. The kid made a mistake, spilling half the mixture, and instead of getting angry, Tony just laughed and helped them start over. 24 hours. In 24 hours, unless she completed her original mission, the Galactic Council would reduce Tony's cosmic kitchen and everyone in it to a smoking crater. There has to be another way, she said, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew how naive they sounded. Crix looked genuinely sympathetic, which somehow made everything worse. Complete the mission, Commander. It's the only way to save the rest of them. He activated a personal transport device, his form beginning to shimmer as the teleportation sequence engaged. 24 hours, Zara. Don't make me come back here with a fleet. And then he was gone, leaving Zara alone in the parking lot with the weight of an impossible choice pressing down on her shoulders. Inside the restaurant, Tony caught sight of her again and made a gesture that clearly meant, "Coffee?" His face was open, trusting, completely unaware that he was living on borrowed time. Zara checked her chronometer. 23 hours and 57 minutes. She'd faced down entire armies without flinching, but she'd never had to choose between duty and love, between the life she'd always known and the possibility of something better. And she had less than a day to figure out if there was a third option that didn't involve losing everything that had started to matter to her. 23 hours later, Zara sat in her usual booth, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Her plasma cannon lay disassembled on the table next to her helmet, its components gleaming dully under the restaurant's warm lighting. She'd been trying to work up the courage to reassemble it for the past 6 hours. The lunch rush had come and gone. The dinner crowd was just starting to filter in. Tony moved through his kitchen, with the same fluid grace that had captivated her from the beginning, completely unaware that his death warrant was ticking down in 37-minute increments. "You've been quiet today," he said, sliding into the seat across from her with his own cup of coffee. "Everything okay?" Zara looked up at him, memorizing the concern in his dark eyes. The way his hair fell across his forehead, the small scar on his left hand from what he'd told her was an unfortunate incident with a mandolin slicer. In another timeline, another universe, she might have had years to catalog these details. Instead, she had minutes. "Tony," she said carefully, "what would you do if you found out everything you believed about yourself was wrong?" He considered this with the same seriousness he brought to perfecting his marinara recipe. "I guess I'd have to decide whether I wanted to keep being wrong or start being right. Simple, direct, utterly, Tony. And if being right meant giving up everything you'd worked for, everything you thought you wanted, then I'd have to ask myself what I actually wanted," he said, reaching across to touch her hand again, "and whether what I thought I wanted was ever really mine to begin with." The wisdom of it hit her like a physical blow. Her entire life, everything she'd fought for, conquered, achieved, had been in service to someone else's vision of what she should be. The Galactic Council had taken a scared young alien and turned her into their perfect weapon, and she'd been so grateful for the purpose, the belonging, that she'd never stopped to ask if it was what she actually wanted. "Tony," she began, then stopped. "How did you tell someone you'd been sent to kill them? How did you explain that in 36 minutes an orbital strike would reduce everything he'd built to radioactive dust unless you murdered him first?" "I know," he said quietly. Zara's head snapped up. "You know what?" "I know you're not really a cosplayer," Tony said with a gentle smile. "I've known since the second day. Your costume has technology I've never seen before. You eat like someone who's never had fresh food in their life, and yesterday I watched you accidentally bend a steel spoon with your bare hands." "Then why," she started, her voice catching, "why did I keep pretending? Because you seemed to need me to. Because underneath all that armor and those weapons, you looked like someone who'd forgotten what it felt like to be treated like a person instead of a weapon." Tears she didn't know she could produce began sliding down her purple cheeks. "Tony, there are things you don't understand. Things I've done. Things I'm supposed to do. Are you here to hurt people?" The question was so simple, so direct, that it cut through 40 years of military conditioning like Tony's German steel through fresh basil. "I was," she whispered. "I was supposed to hurt you." "But you didn't." "No, I couldn't." "Then that's what matters." The restaurant's front door chimed, and Zara looked up to see Lieutenant Commander Crix entering with 2 other officers she didn't recognize. Their expressions were grim, professional, and utterly without mercy. "Time's up, Commander," Crix called across the restaurant, his voice carrying clearly over the dinner conversation. "The Council has run out of patience." The entire restaurant fell silent. Maya, the server who'd joked about Zara being Tony's girlfriend, slowly backed toward the kitchen. The customers looked around nervously, clearly sensing that whatever was happening, it was way above their pay grade. Tony looked from Crix to Zara, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding to something that might have been pride. "So you really are from space," he said. "Commander Vex," Crix continued, advancing toward their booth with the measured pace of someone trained in de-escalation protocols. "Step away from the human, complete your mission, and we can all go home." Zara stood slowly, her hand moving to her disassembled weapon. She could put it together in 15 seconds. One clean shot, and Tony would be gone. The orbital strike would be called off. The restaurant would be spared. Everyone else would live. All she had to do was kill the man who'd shown her what it meant to be valued for something other than her capacity for violence. "I can't," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent restaurant. Crix's expression shifted to something like pity. "Then you've left us no choice." He raised his own weapon, not at Tony, but at Zara herself. "If you won't complete the mission, we'll complete it ourselves and court-martial you afterward." That's when Tony Martinez, owner and operator of Tony's Cosmic Kitchen, did something that would become legend in certain circles of galactic military history. He stood up, walked around the table, and placed himself directly between 2 heavily armed alien warriors and said, "You'll have to go through me first." "Tony, no!" Zara breathed. But he was already moving, spreading his arms wide to shield her, his entirely human, entirely fragile body the only thing standing between her and a plasma blast that could vaporize a small building. "She's under my protection," he announced to the room, as if he regularly declared war on interstellar military forces. "Anyone who wants to hurt her is going to have to deal with me." And that's when the most amazing thing happened. Maya stepped out from behind the bar, hefting a rolling pin like a battle club. "Yeah, what he said." Old Mr. Peterson, who came in every Tuesday for the meatloaf special, stood up from his corner table. "Count me in, son." Mrs. Chen, The regular who always complained about the portion sizes but left 20% tips anyway, positioned herself next to the coffee machine. Nobody messes with our people. One by one, every single person in Tony's cosmic kitchen stood up, armed themselves with whatever was handy, and formed a protective circle around Zara and Tony. Crix stared at the scene with the expression of someone whose entire understanding of the universe had just been turned upside down and shaken vigorously. "This is not tactically sound," he said, almost to himself. "No," Zara agreed, looking around at the faces of humans prepared to fight an unwinnable battle against superior technology, simply because they'd decided she was worth protecting. "It's something much better." She turned to Crix, her decision finally, irrevocably made. "I resign my commission, effective immediately." "You can't resign in the middle of a mission, Commander." "I just did, and if the Council wants to reduce this place to ashes because I chose love over conquest, then they're going to have to explain to the entire galaxy why they needed an orbital strike to deal with one small restaurant full of humans whose only crime was showing kindness to a stranger." Crix looked around the restaurant, taking in the faces of ordinary people prepared to fight impossible odds for someone they barely knew, and something in his expression shifted. "Stand down," he said to his officers. "Sir?" one of them asked. "I said stand down, we're leaving." As they headed for the door, Crix paused next to Zara. "For what it's worth, Commander, I think you made the right choice. The Council won't see it that way, but maybe it's time someone challenged what they see." And then they were gone, leaving Zara alone with Tony, and a restaurant full of humans who'd been prepared to die for her. "So," Tony said, slipping his arm around her waist as if interdimensional incidents were just another Tuesday at the restaurant, "I'm guessing you're probably out of a job now." "Completely unemployed," Zara agreed. "Well, I've been needing help in the kitchen. You interested in learning a different kind of warfare?" Roy looked around the restaurant, at the faces of her self-appointed protectors, at the man whose kindness had taught her the difference between conquest and connection, and realized that she'd finally found the place where she belonged. "Tony Martinez," she said. "I thought you'd never ask." 6 months later, the Galactic Council's intelligence reports would note with confusion that the most feared warrior in their military had completely vanished from all known systems. What they didn't know was that she could be found any Tuesday through Sunday at Tony's cosmic kitchen, teaching the dinner rush the finer points of efficiency while learning that the best battles weren't fought with weapons, but with perfectly seasoned sauce and unconditional acceptance. And if her marinara recipe happened to be seasoned with techniques learned conquering distant worlds, well, that just made it more interesting. After all, every great love story needs a little bit of danger in the sauce.